The 41st millennium is known as the time of ending. The mighty Imperium of man has stood unconquerable over the galaxy for 10,000 years. Humanity has survived against the orcs, the Eldar, and even the dread forces of chaos. Recently, however, the facade of imperial dominance has begun to chip and shatter. Trillions of humans have spread across unnumbered worlds and maintain a titanic military of hundreds of millions. And yet it still isn't enough to stem the tide of invasion, slaughter, and destruction. The race of man has been responsible for annihilating planets or even entire races of its foes. But those victories are increasingly bought at a very steep price. A price paid in billions of human souls wiped from the face of the universe by alien horrors. Man remains strong, but his firm, if aging grip, tightly held over millions of planets, is waning. One of these worlds is on the distant eastern fringe of the galaxy, Sotha. Sotha was one of the few Earth-like worlds discovered on the remote edges of the Milky Way. A verdant land rich with oceans, forests, and animals. The beauty of nature laid bare in rolling meadows and fields. The world was pristine, a miraculous garden world untrammeled by the crude forces of industry and war. This once thriving planet has become a wasted rock floating in space without even an atmosphere to breathe. This occurred despite the heroic resistance of the planet's defenders, the Scythes of the Emperor. The Emperor's Scythes are a relatively new chapter of Space Marines founded in the year 500 Millennium 41, during the 25th founding. It is speculated that they came from the Ultramarine strain of Gene Seed, but that is only a guess. They charge forth into battle with the rallying cry, "For the Emperor, we are his Scythes." The Marines of Sotha sliced through the enemies of man like sheaves of wheat. The Scythes have a yellow-black color scheme and were, of course, fond of iconography featuring the Pale Horseman. Some have claimed that the greatest warriors of the chapter are even given a power scythe. The power scythe is an ancient weapon similar to the power sword that was last used in the days of the Great Crusade. The Scythes are said to have dusted off the ancient design and rode into battle embodying the warriors of old, who swept across the galaxy conquering in the name of the Emperor. In their short life, the Emperor's Scythes have amassed an impressive tally of victories, slaying Orc, Eldar, and human traitors alike, even leading the First Great Crusade against the Tau Empire. They were considered zealous enough to take under their wing the Lamenter's penitent chapter of Space Marines. Together the two would forge a bond of blood which made the Scythes proud to restore a group of fellow warriors from shame and ignominy. The Damocles Gulf Crusade against the Tau would likely have been another glorious victory for the unstoppable race of man. The Scythes were said to erupt from the heavens and reduce their foes to nothingness like the Grim Reaper himself come to collect his allotment of souls. After the triumphs against the Orcs and stalemate against the Tau, the Scythes of the Emperor found themselves caught in the gunsights of fate. They were forced to withdraw by a threat far more terrible than they had ever faced. In this final age of the Imperium of man, the nightmarish threats to humanity have been multiplying. There are many contenders for the most dangerous threat to humanity, including the mysterious Tau, the immortal Necrons, and a renewed Black Crusade by the forces of Hell itself. But among the most recent and most alien of horrors confronting the battle lines of humanity are the ferocious Tyranids. The Tyranids are a macroscopic plague infecting the galaxy with its spawn. They came from the void between galaxies, drawn by the astropathic beacons seeking precious biomatter. Their hive fleets are great masses choking with hideous life. The Tyranid race are ugly insectoid creatures with teeth like broken glass, rending claws, and armored chitinous carapaces. They communicate via telepathy with a hive mind controlling their actions. Once a fleet arrives on a planet, it is almost certainly doomed. Even if the fleet is defeated, the planet will be inextricably tainted by the disease of Xenos infection. For the Tyranids conquer not with death, but by giving life. hideous, bloody life sprayed throughout the entire world. Infiltrators land first, seeking to replace human leaders. A cult is created among the vast sea of disaffected and resentful human underclasses. Together they weaken a planet's defenses in preparation for the onslaught. When the mass of the fleet arrives, the warp itself is disrupted by the awesome psychic power of the hive mind, preventing any outside defenders reaching the planet's surface. Planetary bombardment with fleshy mycetic spores commences. The spores contain vast amounts of Tyranid life, some of it microbial. They infest and alter the less complex mineral and organic life forms into something the Tyranids can easily ingest. Later, complex forms containing the Tyranid warrior strains are spawned and begin attacking the planet's defenders. The planet's own biological resources become clay to shape yet more loathsome creatures. Sotha suffered this and more during the Second Tyrannic War. The Scythes faced the dread forces of High Fleet Kraken. They withdrew from crushing the wicked Tau and retreated to the safety of their fortress monastery on Sotha. There the Scythes proved their loyalty to the Emperor by resisting to the uttermost limit of endurance. Sotha was wrecked as no Orc pillager or Eldar raider could. The Tyranids exterminated all life they found on the verdant world, draining the oceans dry, consuming every plant, animal, and human, even inhaling the atmosphere itself. The Scythes cut down millions of Tyranid scum, but billions more were coming. An oceanic tide of rending teeth and claws marched ever closer to the Chapter's fortress. The Scythes gave their lives to the end to protect every last ship that was trying to escape the tendrils of the Kraken. When their world was well and truly dead, when their people lay shattered by the hundreds of millions, when their ammunition was almost gone and 90% of the planet was converted to Tyranid biomatter, only then did the Scythes escape. Only 1/5 of the Chapter survived, a bare 200 Marines with a handful of serfs. They managed to break out just as the final hordes overwhelmed their defenses and swept into their home. The Scythes dodged Hive Fleet patrols and spaceborne swarms until they landed on the nearby death world of Miral. The Scythes chose a magnificent natural citadel called the Giant's Coffin, a suitable bulwark of rock and jungle to hold out against any foe. And there they waited for the inevitability of their own death. Prepared to make a last stand, morale almost broken by the loss of their world and so many battle brothers. In due course the Tyranids found them and made ready a final wave of grinding flesh and bone to liquefy the Scythes and absorb them into the collective. But all was not lost. The chapter master of the Scythes, Thorcyra, decided to save his decimated squadrons and resist the urge of self-immolation. The Scythes would forever bear the shame of defeat against the Kraken, but that shame should be channeled into fury against the enemies of mankind. What better way to spit your last breath of hate into the face of fate? Thorcyra gave the Emperor's Scythe, a mighty artifact said to have been wielded by the Emperor himself during the Great Crusade, to the last surviving captain, Thracius. With that act, the Scythes departed the world, leaving their former chapter master to hold off the legions of Xenos singly. The last stand of Thorcyra passed into Imperial legend as a noble sacrifice, and a magnificent display against a mighty foe. The remaining Scythes who had survived Sotha and Miral numbered barely 100, 1/10 of a chapter's normal strength. The iron will of the Scythes had acquitted them on the field of battle, taking enormous losses to save millions of Sothans who retreated during the engagement. But they had still lost, the bitter sting of defeat forcing them upward and back into the battle. The Scythes are now a fleet-based chapter, surviving on a badly damaged battle barge renamed the Heart of Sotha. The barge is not even fully functional and needs frequent repairs to stay spaceworthy. Supplies are limited and much of the chapter's equipment is not Codex Astartes compliant. They have only 4 barely functional suits of Terminator armor. Hardly any armored vehicles, and even things such as food and ammunition must be rationed very carefully. It is a grim, unpleasant, and desolate life. The Scythes scour the remote eastern fringe of the galaxy, scavenging what they can by looting derelict ships and space stations, forever struggling to keep themselves from disintegration. Far from resigning themselves to despair, the Scythes' will to resist is almost beyond belief. Despite every odds stacked against them, the Emperor's Scythes have begun a series of counterattacks direct into the heart of the swarm. The forge of defeat and near extermination have actually been a boon to the Scythes' ability in fighting the Tyranids. Their chapter is likely the best force the Imperium has person for person against the tyrannic threat. The Scythes study their foe intently and have become masters at defeating Xenos bioinfestations of the Tyranid swarm. They commonly gain veterancy and promotion in their chapter only through intense raiding into the center of a massive city-sized hive ship. Inside the dark, wet, living corridors, the Scythes fight until choked with corpses of their foes. A frantic search then begins. They race through every hall, every biocontainment chamber looking for lost brothers. Rumors persist that Scythes are still alive, trapped decades later inside the hive ships, glued to the walls and used for ineffable Xenos experiments. The Scythes cannot allow their brothers to be tortured and imprisoned thusly. Much of the emotional impetus for taking the fight to the Tyranids is to save their friends from a lifetime of torment. Few living Scythes are ever found, but rumors persist of some Emperor Scythes living within the ships themselves, a cancer of man in the galaxy's ultimate tumor, tearing away at the Xenos from the inside. The ships are also a great source of lost weapons and armor, which the Marines commandeer for their own use. The Scythes spend a considerable amount of time visiting human worlds to find suitable recruits. The lack of romance in joining a broken chapter with few prospects, combined with the high attrition rates against a fearsome enemy, has made this a slow process. Yet recently the number of Scythes has gone up. It will take decades, if not more, to fully replenish their stock, but the chapter is certainly marching back to greatness and strength. And the constant counterattacks against the Great Devourer has kept morale high in a desperate situation. Despite losing their chapter master, their armor, their tanks, their serfs, and even their homeworld, the Scythes have never lost their hope. They're out there still, wandering in the darkest depths of the void, prowling around, waiting to fight back, waiting in the inky blackness of deep space, rebuilding their numbers, honing their battle lore to perfection, ready to revenge themselves by repaying the sin of genocidal extermination against a vile race of Xenos that so nearly wiped them out. In the increasingly bleak and forlorn galaxy of the 41st millennium, humanity survives. It fights, it gains revenge, and it holds its ground. And out there in the void, the heart of Sotha still beats, waiting for its day of vengeance.